the colors and everything, like it makes me really happy.
Right?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Bear in Mind webinar for April. Today's theme is Nurtured by Nature, and it's kind of appropriate because April is Stress Awareness Month, and we have Earth Day, which we believe is every day at NHBSR that falls this month. So it's kind of a combination of the two. This program will cover theories and philosophies that connect humans to nature and applications of research and practice. Before we start, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors for this program. We have Kennebunk Savings, Coca-Cola of the Northeast, and Prime Buckles. We also have a lot of our content sponsors, Full Spectrum Wellness, Rosemary Conroy, who did the painting we were just talking about, and the Richards Group, NAMI New Hampshire, Dartmouth, UNH, and the Brown Center. I will introduce the speakers with a short bio, and my colleague Debbie will be placing a link to the extended bio in the chat. So Lauren Ferguson is an assistant professor in the Department of Recreation Management and Policy at UNH. Over the past several years, she evolved her research program into one that is both applied and interdisciplinary. One line of research that she's particularly proud of involves soundscape management within national parks. And she continued this line with a study of climbers' perception of soundscapes on the Grand Teton. I hope I pronounced it right. It's an extensive bio, so I urge you to look in the link. Thompson has over 28 years of experience in the field of recreational therapy, direct service provision, and program development capacities. They have long history of serving individuals with complex and chronic health needs, including physical disability, chronic health conditions, and behavioral health needs, and facilitating of RT, which is recreational therapy, interventions to support all aspects of health. And I will stop share and allow the speakers to share with us and start their presentation.
All right. Hold on. Let me make sure it's the right screen. There we go. Thank you so much for that introduction. Both Ty and I are looking forward to this presentation today and sharing our work and our passion with all of you. I think we'll have some time at the end for questions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or feel free to reach out to us. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Today, we'll talk about some theories that connect humans to nature and case studies, some work that I've done and others have done to kind of empirically validate this idea that humans are connected to nature and that it's good for us. And then we'll look at practical applications and then work that Ty has done, and then some major takeaways for both you personally and professionally. So I just want to introduce myself. Other than being a professor at UNH, I'm also someone that loves the outdoors and loves to recreate. And when I was a freshman in college, I shattered my ankle in a horseback riding accident, and I've had 6 or 7 surgeries on my ankle. And so I've spent a lot of time inside healing my poor right ankle. And this is just one of many casts that I've had on my ankle. And you can tell that it was a seasonal theme. It was around Christmas that I was wearing this one. But I got really down when I was recovering from surgeries because I couldn't hike, I couldn't go rock climbing, I couldn't paddle, like all of these things that I love to do. And when I really reflected on what made me happy, what made me feel better, what helped me get through these difficult times, it was spending time outside. And so with my own research and what I do here at the University of New Hampshire is I'm trying to explore that more deeply in, what is it about natural areas or being in the outdoors that helps us feel better? And also, how can our parks and protected areas be managed and conserved in a way that they provide these benefits to wildlife, to ecosystems, all of those great things, but then also for us, how can they best provide us with these benefits? And so I want you to take a moment, everyone that's here, to start thinking about your experiences in the outdoors and why you want to go outside. So I have a Mentimeter question for you, and you can scan this barcode and go to Menti on your cell phone, or you can go to menti.com. So I'll give you a second to grab that barcode. Slide over my.
It's asking us for a code or to activate.
Oh, it is.
Either entering a new code or signing up.
You could also try this of going to menti.com and putting in the code 999-73214.
Nine 999-73214. Okay.
And these are anonymous. So when it comes in, it's not connecting you to your name. I'm just going to read out some of the things that people are responding. To ground myself, to feel peace, to activate my senses, to connect with nature and de-stress. We're seeing grounded again. It recharges me. Fresh air, sunshine, heal my soul. To be astonished by what's out there. Being outside in the sun, listen to birds touch the ground, breathe fresh, get some relaxation. Great. So these responses will kind of help guide theories and studies that I present in the next few slides here. So this idea that we're connected to the human world, it's one of those things that's innate. We all kind of know that there's something going on, but of course, in the academic world, there are theories and frameworks that are justifying this connection between humans and nature. And the first theory that I like to talk about is called biophilia. And if you just kind of break down that word and what it means, bio means life, and then philic is a type of love, fondness, tendency towards. And it's this idea, and most commonly noted by the scientist E.O. Wilson, if you've heard about E.O. Wilson before. He believed that there's a genetic affiliation between humans and other living things. And that part of it is that we evolved together. We're not separate from the natural world. We are a part of it. And the evidence that is kind of supporting that is that there's this emotional connection that we as humans have to the natural world. And that emotional connection can be anywhere on a spectrum from awe, and I saw some of that in your responses just a second ago, to aversion, where there are things in the natural world that scare us or make us want to run away, like snakes, for example. I know there are people out there that love their reptiles, but for most of us, and even for primates, they don't appreciate animals that make this slithering type of motion. And, you know, there's evidence that being in nature makes people feel peaceful. And I saw that in your responses today, but there are also natural things that can make us afraid. Like I mentioned, the snakes, or, you know, I love natural sounds and hearing birds, like especially now, the first signs of spring, you wake up and you hear the bird chatter. But there's also thunderstorms. Those don't always make me feel safe and secure, but it's something that's natural. It's a part of the natural world. Or hearing, you know, the growl of a mountain lion. Not that that's ever happened to me when I've been out hiking, but if it did happen, I don't think I would feel very peaceful in that moment. But it's just this idea that it evokes feelings, and they're pretty deep-seated, and they're even cultural. And there's evidence that across cultures, people feel certain ways about the outdoor world, whether it is a peaceful feeling or emotional, like appreciation, connection, or something that is an aversion, like snakes. And so I talk with my students a lot about this in class, and I'll ask them, like, what would you prefer in terms of a roommate here? Do you want to spend the night with a spider in your bedroom, or the cute, you know, fluffy puppy? And most everyone chooses the fluffy puppy, except for those that say, well, I'm allergic to puppies. But I'm like, imagine that you weren't allergic to dogs. And these are both animals that are very much a part of our world. And you know what? There's a reason that humans have domesticated dogs. We have an attraction towards that specific species. Spiders, not so much. People aren't necessarily domesticating their spiders. Another example of this is I'll ask students, you know, where would you prefer to go on a backpacking trip? And most of them will say, the scene that's in B. And that's because, you know, they're more familiar with that type of landscape. They feel like they could find water, they could find food, and that the other landscape, they're like, well, that looks like a place that would have snakes and scorpions, and it would also be really, really hot. And so they have an emotional connection to, you know, these different types of ecosystems in a way, and the type of biodiversity that's in these places. Another one is I'll say, where do you want to go for a walk? Like you've got a 20-minute break, you're in the middle of studying, you've got to relax. And most everyone says B. And this is both, you know, places in Manhattan. One is Times Square, the other is Central Park. And for the most part, we are more attracted to places that are natural. There's something in us that's just, you know, if I need to go for a quick, relaxing walk, I'm going to go where it's natural versus where it's loud, where there's a lot of action, things along those lines. And we see evidence of biophilia in all aspects of our lives. We see it in design and architecture. And so I have this picture here of Falling Waters in Pennsylvania, Frank Lloyd Wright House. And there are, you know, hundreds of examples of this where designers are putting elements of the natural world into homes, workplaces, things like that, because people are attracted to these types of shapes, these forms, these sounds, all of these aspects. We see it in our art and culture, in what we watch, what we read. People love nature documentaries. They love National Geographic. People prefer paintings of natural scenery. They prefer nature photography, poetry, even music that incorporates natural sounds. Or, you know, I don't know how many people in this group fall asleep to a noise machine, but they're really popular, and, you know, you can buy them, you know, everywhere and anywhere these days. And a lot of the sounds that come out of those sound machines are crickets or waves crashing on the beach. Like, people are really, really into natural things, even if they maybe don't say that they're, you know, an outdoorsy person that likes to go hiking or backpacking or camping or things like that. maybe they're still, you know, they've got a National Geographic on the coffee table. So another theory that connects humans to the natural world is stress reduction theory. And here I am, I'm starting to get more into like the mental health component. And there's a researcher, his name is Roger Ulrich, and he looks at stress measured through heart rate, blood pressure, and cortisol. So kind of like the physiological aspects of stress. And he's found that in places like hospitals, prisons, offices, schools, and other researchers have expanded on this idea that people are recovering quickly from stressful experiences, whether it's a surgery and someone's in an ICU or some type of trauma, things along those lines, when they're exposed to nature. And the exposure that I'm talking about, or the dose of nature, can be anywhere between looking at a view outside of a window of a natural scene of like seeing trees and plants and grass versus seeing buildings and concrete and things along those lines, or having a plant in a room as opposed to having no plant. And so something that I'll talk about a little later is that when we talk about what is the dose of nature or what type of nature exposure is going to help promote recovery from stress, it can be anything from viewing it, being near it, even virtual reality exposure to nature, to kind of like larger doses, like an hour walking outdoors, or, you know, taking a holiday somewhere where you can get out in nature, things like that. And this is why you'll see gardens and courtyards in hospitals. A few months ago, I was at Portsmouth Regional Hospital, and they have a really cool living wall. And know that in most cases, those things aren't there by accident. They're there purposely because people are healing faster when they're exposed to green space, to nature, things like that. Another theory that relates nature to mental health is this attention restoration theory. And attention restoration is kind of more focused on cognitive stress. And, you know, we're all probably very familiar with this idea that, you know, Monday through Friday, we're glued into our screens. We are trying to answer emails. We're managing things at work, managing things at home, and our brains are really tired. We're stressed out, and it's reflected in our ability to function cognitively. And attention restoration theory posits that spending time in nature can hold our soft fascination, like it engages us, but in a way that isn't exhausting. And it helps us mentally recover. So kind of like gives you that space to improve your cognitive functioning. And a lot of the research that's done in this area on attention restoration looks at when people are exposed to nature, are they better able to remember things, to, you know, calculate better, to respond quicker, faster, more effective, things like that. And in a way that's related to stress, that if we can think better and respond better, we're not, you know, feeling that physical stress, which, you know, a lot of physical stress over time isn't great for us. And so in a moment here, I'll talk about some more examples of these theories and how they're tested. And so I took this information from NIH.gov, and you could spend months of your life reading through studies that show that exposure to nature helps improve our health and well-being. And there are numerous studies that show that nature improves stress, sleep, mental health, depression, anxiety, happiness, ADHD, blood pressure, asthma, even birth outcomes. And this list goes on and on and on. And so that body of evidence just continues to grow as more people become interested in this field of what is it about nature other than like our innate understanding that makes us feel better when we're in it or near it or thinking about it or reading about it, things like that. And if you've been outside, you know that it's a pretty dynamic environment. There's a lot going on. When we walk out the door, there's sights, obviously, that are different from what we see indoors. There's sound, there's different ions, there are different things that we smell, all of those things. And so researchers are trying to kind of pinpoint what is it about nature exactly that makes us feel better. And the majority of the research that's done in this area looks at how viewing nature makes us feel better. And so most researchers and people in this area say for sure viewing nature improves a lot of these different health outcomes. But like, you know, my bio mentions something that I'm interested in is natural sound. And so I'm going to talk about a case study that I did back in 2016. And my maiden name is Abbott, and so that's why it's published under that name, where I looked at how sound can improve attention restoration. Or said another way, how can natural sound or man-made sound influence our ability to cognitively recover from a mentally taxing event. And so this study was partially funded by the National Park Service. So we were kind of looking at how could different experiences in terms of acoustics and what we hear in national parks affect cognitive outcomes. And if any of you have been to Yosemite National Park, which is in this picture here, you know that yes, there are beautiful, serene scenes, but then there's also a lot of traffic, a lot of people, a lot of things going on in the park. And so to test this idea and hypothesis, we brought individuals into a lab and we had them memorize a 9-digit number and complete a questionnaire and recite a number. And the whole goal with that was to make someone mentally tired. And the good news is that a lot of the people that we had come in for this study were students, so they were already somewhat mentally tired. So we got them even more, you know, cognitively depleted. And then participants had a recovery period where they watched a video from Yosemite National Park. And it was just a simple video where someone put a camera up in a field and looking at Half Dome. And I'll show you a picture in that video in a moment. And they listened to different sound conditions like natural sound or natural sound overlaid with traffic that they would typically hear if they were in Yosemite National Park. And then we had a control condition where they didn't listen to anything. And then after their 15-minute kind of recovery period, we had participants do a backwards digit span task, which was a way to test their cognitive function. And the backwards digit span task, we asked people to recite numbers back to us backwards. So if I give you a series of numbers 1, 2, 3, you would recite that back to me 3, 2, 1, and you kind of increase the number of digits that you give the individual, and then they get a score based on that. And so we were looking at like the differences between sound exposure and how people performed on this task. And here's a participant in the lab listening to natural sounds and looking at the video of Half Dome. And here's what the video of Half Dome looked like. And the natural sounds weren't crazy, overwhelming. It's probably difficult to hear it on your your screen at home because it was a fairly low frequency, just because we wanted it to be pretty in tune with what you would hear in Yosemite National Park. And, you know, for OSHA standards, we didn't want to blow someone away with the noises that they heard. But we asked people also some open-ended questions like, how did they feel when they were watching the video? And a participant in the control condition who wasn't listening to any sounds at all, natural or man-made, said that they were bored. They got bored quickly, they were distracted. And then we got a lot of feedback from participants who listened to natural sounds saying that they felt relaxed and felt as if they were there because you could hear the stream and birds chirping. We got some qualitative anecdotal evidence that people were enjoying the natural sounds. The main takeaways from this project were that we found the natural sound conditions to be more restorative. So people performed better on these cognitive tasks when they listened to natural sounds versus listening to man-made noises or no sound at all. This kind of builds on the idea that what we listen to in natural settings, it's not just what we see, but what we hear can also help us recover from the day-to-day tasks that we encounter and that, you know, stress us out and make us feel really mentally fatigued. Here's another case study, and this is kind of looking at exposure to nature, like in real time, like a real, you know, experience as opposed to something in a lab. And so there are a lot of studies that show that for healthy individuals, spending time in nature can improve your ability to pay attention, your memory, as well as your mood. But this specific case study wanted to look at what happens to individuals that have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. The method that they used here is they brought individuals into a lab. They asked them questions about their mood and memory. And then participants took a 55-minute walk, either in an urban area or a natural area. And then afterwards, they assessed the same things, mood, memory, things like that. And they found that for these individuals, their memory increased after the walk versus in nature versus when they walked in an urban area. And the same thing happened with mood. They found that mood would improve when people walked in nature, but mood didn't improve. There was no effect on mood when participants walked in the urban area. And I think what's really interesting about this study is that they found that when they compare these results to people that are not diagnosed with depression, the impact was much greater. So they saw a much more significant boost in mood and memory for these individuals that had been diagnosed with depression. So in a way, the power of nature was more impactful for those who had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So I want to talk a little bit about things that I'm working on now at the University of New Hampshire. I have 2 active research studies looking at the connections between human health and nature. One is we're looking at kind of the whole picture in terms of human health and well-being, and how does time in nature influence emotions, mood, stress on kind of like a perceptive level, like what is your perception of your own mood, stress, things like that. But then we're also collecting data on physiological health. So cortisol, oxytocin, heart rate, we're looking at all of these physiological assessments to see what happens when individuals spend time in natural settings versus more urban settings or an indoor setting and things like that. And so I currently have a lot of students that are coming into the lab to participate because they're on campus and they're excited to participate in research, but we're open to other populations. So if you're in the Durham area and you want to pop into UNH for a study, feel free to scan the QR code here and enroll. And this is a project that's ongoing. And so we're going to collect some data this summer and then continue the data collection through the fall. Something about New Hampshire that's been a little bit difficult is that when we have snow and ice on the ground, we don't necessarily want to be taking our participants outside in hopes that it makes them feel better because yeah, we don't want them getting really, really cold or slipping on ice and things like that. So we have to wait until it's a little bit warmer, but we have participants coming in now. We're just saying, you know, be prepared to be outside for a little bit. And then another project that I'm doing is here on campus in College Woods. And if you've been to UNH before, we have a really beautiful protected area right on campus called College Woods with really great hiking trails. And I've partnered with other faculty in natural resources and biology. And we're looking at how biodiversity impacts our mental health outcomes from spending time in nature. And so we're assessing the biodiversity of College Woods. And so we're going to be using game cams and acoustical recording devices to see how many different species of birds, mammals, and then we'll also look at plants and trees are in this ecosystem. And then we'll simultaneously look at people's perceptions of their mental health and well-being, with the hypothesis being that when College Woods is more biodiverse, which is usually like spring, summer, you're just seeing a lot more plants, you're hearing a lot more bird song because they're, you know, trying to find mates and food and things like that. That visitors will have better mental health outcomes. And that's one that's just going to be an intercept survey. So there's a chance that if you come to College Woods in the next 6 months, you'll have one of our research assistants intercept you and ask for you to participate in this study. So I also, you know, don't want to just focus on what is the research and what is the science saying. Let's talk for a second about some practical applications. So there's evidence in the scientific literature that shows that small doses and large doses of time spent in the outdoors or time spent with a view of a natural setting, or, you know, where you can hear natural things, smell natural things, can improve memory, emotions, mood, both physical and mental recovery from stress. Also rumination and like negative thoughts. There's a really cool study that was done by some neuroscientists where they looked at rumination and the difference between walking in an urban area and walking in a more natural area. And they found that walking in a more natural area significantly reduced rumination and some other kind of cognitive functioning activities in the brain that are far beyond my scientific understanding. And a small dose can be 15 to 20 minutes. And then when I'm saying large doses, this is like, you know, the full day hiking or the full, you know, few days or a week out in a natural area during a holiday or things like that. And I like to point this out that it doesn't have to be an hour-long hike in the White Mountains. It's a quick walk near your office building, or a quick walk outside of your house in your neighborhood. It doesn't have to be this trip to a national park or things along those lines. It's important to keep in mind, like, what do I have access to and what's reasonable? Possibilities are endless. And then in terms of the workplace, You can do certain things during the day to prioritize nature exposure. So having walking meetings is something that I've incorporated into my work life. And especially in the work that I do, when I'm working with biologists and, natural resource faculty, we have to meet to talk about our project this summer. Let's not meet in a windowless room and look at our screens. Like just yesterday, a colleague and I, we walked out to a somewhat natural area on campus where we knew that there were frogs that were starting to come out and communicate with each other. And we walked over there and we listened to the frogs for a bit and talked about our work. And I got, a win-win there. We checked off a box that we had to check, and we also got some time in the outdoors. And I think it's important to think about mindful breaks. So a lot of my students, I ask them, what do you do when you have a 10, 15-minute break in your day, you're studying, things like that? What do? They all say, I go on TikTok. Like, so you're taking a break from your screen to look at another screen. And I mean, I've been guilty of it myself, of like, I have a 15-minute break. Let's see what's going on Instagram or Facebook, things like that. And now, after I've talked a little bit about cognitive restoration and attention restoration theory, we know that taking a mindful break away from a screen, looking outside, listening to the things around you, that's what's going to truly restore your brain and give you the ability to work better when you go back to your desk. Access to windows and plants. There's research that shows that when you set up your work environment in a way that you have some greenery around you, it can be beneficial to cognitive performance and reduction in stress. And know that I used to be in an office that was actually a closet and there were no windows, and I was doing this research, so I knew like, oh, I'm going to bring in some fake plants and do whatever I can to make this space feel like there's a bit more nature. And I talked about access to gardens, courtyards, living walls. Those types of things aren't often done by accident. People are designing these spaces for recovery. And then another one to just throw out there is like, if you have the ability to do it, walking or biking to work is one of those things that this research is showing can be really beneficial to your mental as well as physical health. So just like being mindful about, I even try to park farther away from my office, knowing that I'm going to spend a lot of time sitting, a lot of time at a screen, might as well spend a little bit more time outdoors if it's possible. And that's all I have for you at the moment, and I'm going to hand it over to Ty.
Thanks, Lauren. Continue. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be able to be here with y'all today. And so my name is Ty Thompson. My pronouns are they, them. I'm one of the program directors over at Northeast Passage. We are a program of the University of New Hampshire. So we're a part of sort of outreach and engagement of the university with the surrounding community. And the reason that I get to be here today is because I get to take some of the amazing information that comes from academic spaces like Lauren is giving to us today and work with people in the soup of life to figure out how does it make sense in the reality of day to day. So what I want to be able to do is talk a little bit about recreational therapy, because that may not be language that comes out of everybody's mouth every day, to understand this idea of social determinants of health, because that is really about access to the everyday people, places, and things that support health, including the natural environment. Look at the factors that determine and impact access, and give examples of how facilitating access to the natural environment and recreation impacts health outcomes. So that's an awful lot in a little bit of time. So hang on, here we go. All right. Oh, I already did that one. So our mission is to empower people living with disabilities, both visible and invisible, to define, pursue, and achieve whole life health, community engagement, and personal fulfillment. And we develop and promote best practices in the fields of recreation and adaptive sports. So recreational therapy is an allied health profession that uses the context of facilitated recreation engagement to address the needs of individuals living with a variety of disabling conditions. And these can be visible disabilities, maybe visible mobility impairments that people can see, like spinal cord injury, or sometimes after stroke or brain injury, any other sort of mobility impairment. It may be invisible disabilities that people have, maybe chronic health conditions, maybe chronic pain, behavioral health conditions, intellectual, developmental disabilities. And what we're really all about is supporting people in creating strategies to increase access to meaningful engagement with the everyday people, places, and things that support health and well-being. So those everyday people, places, and things are what is known as social determinants of health, which is increasing language, I think, in healthcare spaces, and people paying a lot more attention to health equity, right? So how are we providing and ensuring equal access to the things that support health across all peoples in our communities? Oh, that's a very fancy transition. So Northeast Passage, we have a sort of a continuum of services that we provide. We do adaptive sports and recreation. You can see we have like a whole list of things that we offer seasonally. And really, if you come to visit Northeast Passage ever, and I strongly suggest that if you are interested, that you reach out and find a time to do so. We have a whole back room full of adaptive equipment that allow people to find ways to engage in things that align with their sense of self, fulfill family roles that are meaningful and important, and sort of live the daily kind of a lived expression of the things that we value and are important, because these are the things that are tied to health and well-being. Within our adaptive sports program, we have some competitive adaptive athletics programs, including power soccer, sled hockey, quad rugby. We're trying to get a wheelchair lacrosse program up and running, which is super exciting, to create equal opportunity. So if we're sort of moving into the land of health here, and Lauren kicked that off for us. The World Health Organization defined health as a complete state of physical, social, and emotional well-being. So rather than just like the absence of disease or disability, what we're really wanting to do is frame health in this like a broader perspective, right? So if we have two people who have experienced a stroke and maybe have hemiplegia, so one side of their body has weakness, and one person gets real stuck in this point of transition with change that can be really, really difficult to navigate, and remains more at home, drifts away from the people that used to be friends and supporters and loved ones, and engaging in the things that feel important. That person ultimately has more secondary health conditions that occur because of isolation, because of decreased activity, because of all sorts of other secondary factors that go along with that. If you've got somebody with that same sort of level of functioning who is able to engage in the world, whether it be adaptive cycling or, walking on an accessible trail, or, even being part of a book club and being connected with other people, the health outcomes are greater. Right. So this idea of well-being sounds a little bit fluffy and light. And what does that really mean? It feels intuitively important, but not necessarily directly tied to health, but it really is. And there's kind of two definitions for that. One is like feeling good or feeling pleasure. Like I super love eating ice cream. Makes me feel happy in the moment, right? But it's different than well-being, right? Well-being is this sense of vitality that comes from acting on the things that matter most and moving towards the things that we believe to be valuable and worthy, right? Clarifying what we stand for and acting accordingly. So The Happiness Trap is an excellent book where I took this directly from, just because it's so worded so very, very well. And it really makes a nice distinction. So, and I have to confess, I'm unused to presenting and not being able to see squares of people's faces to gauge reactions or see hands going up. But I invite people to think of roles that you have that feel meaningful, like a parenting role or a teaching role or a supervising role or a creating role someplace in the world. And oftentimes the feelings that go along with that are not all happiness and bliss, right? Like they may be frustration, they may be like intense stress, they may be all these things, but the fact that they are tied to this thing that is very, very valued is still part of well-being. So there's a difference between feeling happy and moving towards things that matter most to us. Oh, that was an abrupt transition, right? And how this connects, I think, to nature and engagement, right, in those everyday people, places, and things, has to do with this idea of meaningful engagement. So I would like everybody to think of a time, find it on your phone, of a time when you were meaningfully engaged in nature, in the outdoors. So I have here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is actually me with my Thor mask on. I've had opportunity to be a commercial fisherman since I was 16 years old, fishing with a particular family. I go every summer up to Alaska, so that's the location that I'm in. The little kids in the background here are now like 5th generation of this family for a commercial fishing operation. And it happened to be the youngest one's birthday. And because it's during the fishing season and we fish according to the tides, the birthday party, complete with chocolate cake, happened at 6 o'clock in the morning. And party masks, right? So that later, like a half an hour later, when we're down at the, down on the water, we brought the masks to put it on as a surprise because we knew the kids were going to be down there. And then the other pictures are the sunset in the sky, which is just expansive in nature. So what I would like you to do in your chat feature, if you would, go to chat, and with that picture either in hand or clearly in mind, put in 2 words. Where is the place and what is the physical thing that you are doing? So I would type in Alaska and commercial fishing. Right. And if everybody could just, like, with that picture clearly in your mind or on your phone in front of you, where is the place and what are you doing? That's awesome. So this reinforced, I mean, I think I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir when people are attending things about recreation and natural spaces in the outdoor, and that there's a wide variety of things that we all love to do, and interests that we all have. And one of the great things about New England is that there is a rich diversity from mountains to beach, to be able to be engaged in high spaces and low spaces out in the world around us. Kind of with that same picture in mind, let's go ahead and transition back to this menti.com, put in a new code for yourself. And I'm just going to transition to the different share. So the code is 98050332. So beyond the image that you have in mind, like beyond fishing, beyond hiking, beyond snorkeling, walking with the dogs, sledding in Vermont, bird watching at the beach, that you guys, all the amazing things that you identified, what are the pictures about, right? So for me, the picture is about connection. It's about joy. It's about strength. Those are the things that image is always about to me. Yes. I always love watching these words pop up. And these are the words of well-being, right? Every healthcare practitioner in the world, this is what they want for their clients that they serve, right? They want people to be able to feel connection, feel peace, have beauty, companionship, this idea of family role, the ability to be refueled and refreshed, right? These are the words of well-being that are so, so crucial to us. There's actually kind of some themes where well-being is derived, right? So in positive psychology, they think of it as PERMA. So it's like positive emotion, relationships, engagement, this idea of redemption or overcoming, and this last one of engagement, flow, and awe. So on your code, if you want to just like plug in which is the one that's the primary theme for you, you should be able to see that right on your. It's always fun to see where people land in these, right? So this idea of relatedness and connection oftentimes is real high in social spaces where people are willing to share. But this idea of engagement, flow, and awe is also real important too, right? So Lauren was talking about it being tied to increased levels of oxytocin, that sort of love hormone that helps us actually feel more connected. It helps us feel humble. I saw feeling small was one of the things there, feeling humble and part of something larger than ourselves. All right, I'm going to go back to the screen here. So one of the things that's real important when we think about what influences health, the contributing factors are like the physical structure and function of individuals, and our personal factors related to us, whether it be things that we value, skills that we have, confidence, executive functioning for planning and budgeting, these types of things. And the other things are the environmental factors. So access to those everyday people, places, and things are super huge, right? So if I think about what it took for me to access like commercial fishing in Alaska, it has to do with transportation. It has to do with my social relationships. It has to do with my ability to navigate independently across the country. It has to do with an awful lot of things environmentally that support my ability to do that. So our community-based rec therapy program that we have really works with people individually. It's an immersive functional intervention. So when I meet with people, I look at like not only what's happening with your body, but where do you live? What are the things that you are interested in? Who are the people in your life, and what are the resources in your community? And how are we navigating access to those things that are going to be supporting your health? And the other thing, right? So we can work in the environmental space, and we can also work in the personal space. So this person with the bird in their hand was a client that I had who had really complex post-traumatic stress, as well as chronic pain. And what ends up happening is that it impacts your brain, and healthcare practitioners are like, yeah, practice the mindfulness meditation, practice the centering and the grounding, but it's really difficult. And what we ended up doing was practicing that with the bird in the hand and noticing the feeling of the bird feet on her hand, and being able to figure out how are we creating sanctuary in her backyard so that this idea of being in nature could be something that was accessed every day. So that is about like personal functional skill development, and that may be about the processes that are non-visible for people in terms of functional skills, the ways that we think, the habits of thinking, the ability to notice self and integrate aspects of self into actions. And the other part might be more complex, sort of like physical skills related to disability. So we work with a lot of veterans, happened to work with one veteran who was a husband, father, provider, protector, spinal cord injury, chronic pain, post-traumatic stress, depression, anger, had been hospitalized with suicide ideation, and wasn't leaving his house because he was nervous about being able to get up if he fell down and people might look at him funny. And if it took too long, what does that mean? So we started with some really basic functional skill development. I went to a yoga class, truthfully, even though that's inside, just so that we could practice getting up and down off the ground. But after that, really focused on activities that were valuable to him and valuable to his family role as father. So cycling, paddling, climbing, and being able to figure out what are the strategies and adaptive equipment that he would need to function in that role as a father. And last time I spoke to this person, he had just gotten back from a camping trip with his kids and had figured out how to crawl in and out of the tent to be able to participate in camping with his kids. So it's a really, really powerful way to work with people in nature and in feeling confident and in facilitating engagement. The opposite of that, the drift away from those social determinants of health, the everyday people, places, and things that support health, is really loneliness, truthfully, right? Think about how important connectedness was, and this idea of awe, connectedness to something larger than ourselves, kind of spiritual aspects of nature. It has a physical, it has a price tag attached to it related to health outcomes. So Medicare spends an additional $1,600+ a year for each elder person who has limited social connections. And loneliness has the same impact of smoking on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, per a recent study by Cigna with behavioral health. So the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy really identifies that loneliness should be targeted as a public health campaign, much like we do with smoking and immunizations. It's really, really important. And if we think about all of those words that you all associated with engaging in nature related to social connectedness, it's important to be thinking about access to those natural spaces for everybody and how people are doing it, right? So this is where we kind of roll into health equity as an action, the processes, the policies, the practices and the policies, how we share positions of authority and give voice to marginalized communities to be able to increase access and protect, to increase access to those public and natural spaces that support health, right? So if we're looking at community access, we're thinking about like the built environment. So like the very minimum that we are doing is like ADA compliance, but beyond that, what are the policies and attitudes of others that create acceptance in those spaces for whether it be disability or minority populations or just the diversity that exists within our community? What's the financial infrastructure of resource access, and what is transportation to those spaces? So, and I think attached to that, there are public spaces for business owners in particular. You guys have amazing sphere of influence, I think, to be thinking about the design of the physical design of our communities, as well as the policy design of our communities, the policy design of healthcare access, the policy design of public transportation. I took a quick look at who might be here today, and I was really impressed by the diversity of all the different spheres of business in our public sectors that are interested in the impact of climate here. I'm paying attention to time and realizing we probably need to button it up here. So maybe I'll share this last slide with Lauren for some takeaways. You're muted.
It's only been like 5 years now that we've been zooming. Sure. I can do the mute. So our main takeaway is like we want to leave you with a little bit of action items, as well as like, what does this all mean? And so Ty and I think about it like there's internal access that we can talk about with green space or access to nature, and also external. And so I'll talk about internal. And so Where we can possibly within our workplaces have some access to green spaces through plants, courtyards, living walls, prioritizing breaks that happen away from screens. It's really easy to take a break and browse your email, browse Facebook, whatever the case may be. But if you're prioritizing your mental health, physical health will probably come along with this one of taking a moment to step outside and reset for the day. Things like that, and creating a culture that recreation in the outdoors or breaks in the outdoors, that this is something we want to celebrate and, you know, do with each other too. Ty talked a lot about connectedness and, you know, maybe finding ways that you can recreate outdoors with your colleagues or with your families all together. Things like that can be really beneficial to both mental and physical health. And then I'll let Ty talk about the external access.
Yeah, and I think that is about accessibility in the position, the sphere of influence that we each have in our sector and in our personal lives, whether it be professionally or personally, right? Around sustainable development, around policy related to green space access. How are you creating community partnerships or supporting community partnerships that allow for access to our environmental spaces across all of our neighbors, basically, to support health of everybody. And I think that's it there.
Thank you both. If we have maybe time for one question, I know we're running out of time, but if there's a quick question we can address, I put the link to our event in May at UNH's Brown Center for mitigating stress. If you want to take a look at that, again, the recording will be sent in a follow-up email with the slides, resources, contact information. And Lauren and Ty put together a wonderful list of resources for you with access to maps of state parks and local parks and a lot of nice resources. So look for that in your follow-up email. If we don't have questions, do we have any questions? I know you're in over time. Okay, so you're getting all that information. I want to thank our speakers for sharing this valuable information and tips and applying it to a workplace setting. This was very useful. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see some of you in the May event or in the spring conference where we will continue talking about mental wellness. Thank you.